marathon runner myself, so thanks for the good segue and good intro into this. And I haven't run yet the Tokyo Marathon, but at some stage I want to run that as well. But yeah, I'm a founder and entrepreneur myself, and like we met with many of you, I think most of you, already on Monday evening when I talked about my company. But actually, there is a much bigger story that I can share with you, like what we have learned, what I've learned over the last 10 years in Estonia when working in the financial sector and resolving large problems which relate to financial crime. And what I wanted to tell you is like you have heard a lot about Estonia as a tech-savvy country, digital government, lots of startups, lots of technology companies, X-Road, everything else we have here. Tiny country, 1.3 million, and so on. But actually, about 2017, which was like 8 years ago, like massive scandal hit us, which was related to money laundering. And back then it was like, I think still until now, that's like one of the biggest money laundering scandals in the world which has happened. And the Estonian name was actually quite heavily involved in that. And what happened was that actually like the Danske Bank, which is Danish bank, not Estonian, but their Estonian branch was used to launder money from Russia into Europe. And of course it wasn't the only single entity. There was like multiple other institutions involved as well, like Swedbank was accused in similar case. Many other banks were also involved in the scheme of money laundering, but the Danske Bank was in the middle of this scandal because this 200 billion, which later on it came out that it wasn't all the like really dirty money, but 200 billion euros was actually suspected as a criminal proceeds, which moved through the Estonian branch as well. And what it caused massive mistrust in Estonia as an economy, as a country. There was actually there was even like an unofficial fight between the Nordic countries, like Denmark and Sweden, and they had like strategic communication initiative to accuse Estonia in everything which happened over the scandal. Also, the bank itself, headquarters was in Denmark, and they were not clean from the guilty as well. But actually, the damage over the like I think year, like hundreds of articles about Estonia as a money laundering center appeared across the world, and it was like a very systematic attack against the country reputation, and it was like actually really hard to get out from that. And again, the money laundering event itself, it appeared that it happened as well, and like people who were guilty, they got punished, and U.S. federal government was involved in solution, and that was like the money laundering scandal itself. It's actually happened, but actually the bigger drama was that it had a direct impact on our brand economy and the trust in our country. And basically, I just wanted to extract this learning and this use case for you as well. Maybe there are some learnings that you can take away from here. So what actually happened was that Estonia, back then the Russian war wasn't here, and Estonia as one of the countries which was like still is on the eastern border of the European Union, we already back in 2010-ish, we were considered to be like as a nice bridge between the Russian money, Russian economy, and European, Western European countries and economy, and we were like positioned as a Singapore for Eastern Europe, or like different fancy terms were used. And one of the assumptions was that actually we can play this connection between the East and West, and we were encouraged. The financial sector was actually really bullish with taking risks, with serving lots of wealthy companies, wealthy people coming from Russia, sending their investments into Europe, getting some favors back from Europe. So it was like part of the legit business. Legally everything was good. Financial institutions took more and more risks, and some of these risks in the end materialized as a global scandal. But also, it wasn't about one single branch, like Danske Bank Estonian branch. It was like really tiny, but it was also about other banks and other branches inside of Estonia, but also in Latvia and Ukraine and Moldova as well. But one of the challenges was that actually each of these branches or banks, they were working independently. They were just processing their own payments, onboarding own customers, measuring the risks internally, and they didn't see what's happening in the next office, next banking office, like maybe 100 meters away from them. So every member of the financial institution, financial sector worked in silos, and they didn't see this accumulating risks across the industry. And as I said, like its incentive was really novel business-wise. The banks, when they were serving these high-risk customers, then they made a lot of money out of that. It was like pressure to increase profits from this kind of high-risk business, and and profits really happened and came in, and as a result of that, the risks also were gradually increasing, and also supervisory gaps. Like today, as we are complaining, or maybe we should be happy that regulators and auditors are becoming more and more strict, and as we discussed on Monday as well, they're like, especially in the European Union, but in the rest of the world as well, there are like more and more heavy regulations coming out, which are targeting also banking sector. Like we talked about the anti-money laundering and payment service regulation and AI Act and instant payments, instant SEPA and everything else. But also like people who are controlling banks and who are forcing banks to follow these regulations, they are becoming also more strict and more disciplined. Comparing to the times 10 years ago when it was like still on the paper, lots of controls and lots of risk mitigation methods were there, but actually in real life these risks were like overrun. And so as a combination of these kind of risk factors, the scandal happened. And just like fun fact, I think it's like one of the most popular theater shows over this year and over last year is about the Theater Act, which was put together based on this case about money laundering in Danske Bank. And this is like so crazily popular theater that it's impossible to get tickets. People are like bidding and increasing their bids to get tickets to the theater show, but it's not possible. You need to know some people to get a ticket, maybe offer some bribery or something to get a ticket into this theater show. That actually shows that how much this weakness and issue touched the whole society, not only the financial sector. But actually what happened, like, that's a strength that Estonia has repetitively proven, is that when there is scandal, there is a massive problem, then instead of hiding and ignoring and closing down the stuff, actually we are learning from these weaknesses, and we're thinking what to do next and how to improve it. That's something which happened actually 20 years ago when there was cyber attacks against Estonian digital infrastructure, again coming from Russia, and these cyber attacks could have taken down the whole like economic and political society later on. But actually we learned and we became stronger thanks to that, and we established the NATO Cyber Defense Center here in Estonia to help other countries to protect themselves against cyber attacks. And actually the same thing happened with this money laundering scandal as well, that instead of closing down the banking sector, like over-regulating, we actually thought what we can learn from this failure, because this epic failure is not Estonian specific, and the other countries and other regions can also definitely are impacted by the criminal proceeds, people who are laundering money. Basically we, first of all, we accepted that this happened with us, and it wasn't like people were not trying to hide it. There were like court cases, of course, there were like media discussions, lots of people discussed about that. We were monitored by the Moneyval quite carefully, which Moneyval is a sister organization of the Financial Action Task Force. Second is that there was a conscious decision from the government sector and from the private sector that is like, okay, need to move on to the actual high-quality crime fighting, high-quality money laundering protection from simple formal checkboxing or tickboxing exercise which had been happening before, so actually focus more on the quality. We understood also that as all these regulatory procedures in the banks and in the public sector, they are really expensive. On average, I think banks are investing 20% of their budget into the compliance procedures, like customer onboarding, AML controls, sanction screening, fraud detection. And actually, one way to cut the costs or limit the increase of the cost is to collaborate more, to exchange knowledge, to exchange data, share some tools, share some technologies. And again, that was like a learning or conclusion that we drew out, was that in other sectors we had seen that this collaboration, again in cybercrime or other industries, collaboration actually has helped to improve the quality of the process, but also to take down the costs. But in the banking sector it didn't happen yet, so that was another learning. And political and public pressure came in to actually fix it. And one of the very critical change which was done in our laws was that actually banks were allowed to start sharing information, intelligence about possible financial crime between each other. So, Bank Secrecy Act and our personal data in the bank is still sacred unless we're not doing anything criminal or anything highly suspicious. So if I'm giving a good reason for the bank to suspect that I might be laundering money, then they have right to inform other banks, ask, request for information from other banks about me, and I'm fine with that. If I'm taking the risk to do some crime, then I need to expect that someone will catch me as well. So that was like legal change which happened, and it was like one of the first countries in the world which allowed this kind of crime-fighting interest dominated above the privacy requirements, because privacy is an individual thing, but actually crime-fighting is impacting the whole society. So that was a novel decision that was made. And then it kicked off the transformation, which actually took us into the next level in terms of the financial crime fighting levels compared to the place where we were 10 years ago. And I will just quickly touch on those three pillars. Digital infrastructure, which is, again, I guess that you have heard enough about that already. Collaboration between industry and actually tech ecosystem. We have lots of great startups, but also in this kind of niche area, financial crime fighting, lots of many strong regulatory technology startups started to pop up. And as a combination of these three pillars, actually, today we're in a very different level. So, again, I guess you've seen the digital infrastructure, X-Road, which is connecting all the government institutions, data sources and services together, but also banking sector is using heavily the digital ID verification and KYC methods. So that actually, this backbone made it quite natural for the financial sector and for the government sector to build new data sharing technologies and accept the fact that, okay, we know how to control the security issues, how to be compliant with security requirements, how to comply with the data protection and GDPR requirements, because we have done it already in all the other sectors across the country. So it wasn't actually hard to introduce this collaboration, real-time intelligence sharing, real-time data processing between different institutions, because it's part of the backbone of the whole country's digital ecosystem and our culture as well. And culture is important also from the aspect that people do expect to have all the changes or the decisions made in real time and digitally. And that took us to this second pillar, which is very banking and AML banking specific, where the regulator, law enforcement, regulator, and banks started to work together. So the law enforcement actually, as I said, they changed the law, which said that actually banks can start exchanging data between themselves about possible crime. But also banks and law enforcement, police forces, tax and customs can exchange hints, red flags about suspicious events, suspicious customers between each other. So that was actually law enforcement clear change that they made. And now, 8 years later, the whole Europe has changed their laws exactly in a similar manner. So we know what will come next in the next 10 years in Europe, but also in Canada, in the many other countries. Actually, the similar changes are happening right now, which happened here in Estonia many years ago. But actually, thanks to this law enforcement change, it was possible for banks and regulators to start to sit down physically and to discuss physically in the same room what would be the next innovative approach that they can establish and to fight financial crime. And it was like, I happened to be part of these discussions as well, and it was like so nice to see how our financial supervisory authority, our data protection inspectorate, our FIU, on one side, and all the leads or heads of risk financial crime from the financial institutions, they actually sat together and they thought about their joint future, which was actually really encouraging to see that it's not only about controlling and restricting and writing out the fines, but also about getting these people together and think about the future and define safer environment for all of us. And in parallel to these kind of regulatory changes and this drama, there are many regulatory technology companies, startups actually got founded as well. So Veriff might be maybe the most well-known. They're like a unicorn level company already, and they're serving huge markets, huge customers already with the identity verification service, which is again, if you're not controlling digitally people's identity well enough, then actually there's high risk that fraudsters, criminals will open bank accounts and they can start laundering. Thanks to great technologies that Veriff has been building over the last 10 years already, they're helping the financial industry, but not only financial industry actually, to prevent financial crime. Comploq, they founded another regulatory technology company. These people came from banking sector and they had been fighting fraud and money laundering for long years, and actually they established fin crime risk assessment software. And of course my own company Salv as well, which we founded at the same time, because I saw also that there is so massive problem which is hitting now our own country, but there is no question that this kind of same challenges are hitting more and more other countries in the world as well. And by now, again, we're in 2025, we're leading this space in the financial crime fighting world, especially when it comes to the real-time intelligence exchange between the banks and fintechs. Because it's one thing is that the scam fraudsters are using the fact that they can move money instantly in real time, near to real time, in different payment rails, like in SEPA or like in the other payment systems as well. And actually the fraud fighters need to be able to work together also in real time and to recall back the stolen funds. And Estonia was the first country who established it fully. Our own banks are using it on a daily basis actually to help our clients, their victims, to get back the funds, the stolen funds. And also European legislation was largely written based on the Estonian best practices, which is now enforced. And also in terms of not only domestically but also across the borders, banks here are working with the financial institutions coming from Lithuania, coming from Latvia, coming from UK. The cross-border intelligence exchange is a crucial, again, new thing, because every country is still thinking domestically, and they think that their domestic laws are protecting all their customers, but there is need, as the financial crime moves in real time, but it moves also across the borders, then crime fighters also need to be able to exchange knowledge across the borders. And again, that's where the banks here are in the leading position, and they're showing, teaching the best practices and other countries as well how to do that as well. And the other part is that usually banks and fintechs don't trust each other too much. Banks think that fintechs are just hacky, trying to be competitors, and the fintechs think that they are much better than the banks, and banks are slow and corporate boring. But actually, in this financial crime fighting space, they need to work together. They need to come together. Because like again, criminals are using the fact that banks and fintechs are not very close to each other, and when you're sending money from the bank to fintech, then it's a pretty safe move because you know that there's no collaboration. So again, that's something where I see, again, financial institutions around us are working together, like the crypto companies, fintechs, classical retail banks, neobanks, government institutions, and this kind of collaborative framework is again something that we are now teaching in the rest of the world, like how to get these very different sectors to work together. And outcome is that like chief risk officers, chief CEOs of the banks confess that yes, today the data sharing culture and the technology that they have built together, that's actually part of their life-critical infrastructure, which they couldn't think about before. And it wasn't forced on them by regulators, but it was enabled, it was allowed, and they adapted and they thought innovatively. And now they're winning back from that, but also like other countries, like Canada, Ireland, Madagascar, like you name it, they're all like asking advice from the local sector here. But thinking about Japan and what are the learnings, what are the similarities, although the countries are quite far away and the size is very different. But actually, based on our discussion on Monday evening, you also mentioned that the Financial Action Task Force is coming to audit Japan in a couple of years' time. Among the G7 countries, Japan has the weakest score in terms of the anti-money laundering readiness. The scam fraud is also a really huge problem in Japan. So one learning is that it's don't waste a good scandal just by ignoring it. Just take the best out from that, because it's way more easier to break these things if things are in red for government, for prime minister, for top banks, then they're willing to trigger some changes, and that's something. Again, in UK, like for instance, we saw that in UK when the last prime minister, or one before, came into force, and he knew that scam fraud is a massive problem for the UK citizens. Then actually he wrote it into his commitment or into his promises in the politics that he wants to resolve the scam fraud in UK, and he took some serious actions, and now UK is getting better with that. Same in Estonia, like there is like a coalition agreement, government members have agreed, or parliament members have agreed to commission agreement, and this commission agreement also says that we're taking the fraud under control. It's not an easy task, of course, but that's again thanks to the fact that if the scandal is large enough, then you need to use it as a sales argument for this kind of critical movements. The second part is that investing into the rails or infrastructure is way more important than investing into the products. Again, what we see here is doesn't matter what are the actual technologies or products that banks and private sector or public sector are using for data analytics or for tracking the fraudsters, but they need this kind of trusted infrastructure to exchange data points with each other. And in the Japanese case as well, it's every bank is independent, they're separate, of course, so their fintech is separate. But if they agree common technical standards, it doesn't need to be X-Road, but it can be it needs to be joint agreement, and ideally also standard which works across the borders as well to connect with other countries. Then again, that's something people should not forget. I know that it's not easy. It's easy to say, but to trigger this kind of significant new changes, it's always easier to start with start small and then grow. Again, it's a buzzword, but in the banking, this exercise, what we saw here was actually we've got two largest banks. Again, they're not small; they're large banks. At least here, they're large banks. To work together, and the two banks actually, their heads of financial crime sat together. They decided that okay, let's pilot data sharing, intelligence sharing, and see what happens. And if we get any benefit out from that, then we will involve other banks and other banks. And that's exactly what happened. Was that two first banks saw some success, then all the other banks wanted to join. But we have seen also in some other countries where all the banking sector, who are members of the banking association, they're trying to trigger the change altogether, find the consensus. It takes 2 or 3 years to come to common agreement about standards and solutions, which is like way too slow. So start small. Starters themselves don't need to be small, but start with 2 or 3 institutions, run the pilot and then grow. That's something that comes from the startup experience, but actually it also works well in the financial sector products here as well. So to summarize, it's like 200 billion AML scandal is still hitting us, like now, also positively now, because like just got some 50 million fines from US government to Estonian government to spend it for AML reasons, and this fine came from Danske Bank. But actually it was like a drama, and if you Google Danske Bank and Estonia, you will find lots of negative news from the past. Use this momentum to take country environment into next level, implement the technology infrastructure to do whatever you need to do. And yeah, collaboration, again, it's a buzzword, but when seeing how the collaboration really works in the financial sector, that's super encouraging and super motivating to see it in practice, and it is possible to achieve. So thanks for following, and I'm happy to get questions or later on contacts with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.